Welcome to the Philantrepreneur Show, hosted by Dr. Victoria Boyd and Pat Landecker, designed to offer tips, strategies, and insights to empower nonprofits and entrepreneurs with sustainable win-win solutions. The Philantrepreneur Show is sponsored by the Philantrepreneur Foundation, building capacity through education, awareness, and resources. We welcome your questions and input. To call in and join the show, please dial 347-945-7404.
Well, welcome and good morning. This is Dr. Victoria Boyd, President of the Philantrepreneur Foundation, and my co-host, Pat Landecker. And we're just so happy to bring this show as a resource for the Philantrepreneur Foundation, and our mission is to build capacity through education, awareness, and resources. And this show provides nonprofit tips, strategies, and insights from professionals from all across the country and really in many different sectors that can bring some needed information. So, hi, Pat. This year is really flying by. You know, we got one more show in 2016. And somehow we got to make that one special. So how are you doing today?
I am doing just fine, and just so excited about this topic today. It's very unique. I had never, and until you mentioned it at your board-bound training, Victoria, I really didn't even know about it. So I'm going to learn a lot today as well. And as far as 2016, bye. I'm over you.
Let's move on to the next one. You know, and with nonprofit sector fundraising, you know, it's always a hot topic. In fact, when individuals or organizations contact the Philantrepreneur Foundation, generally, you know, in just asking them, so, you know, what do you think you need? Oh, it's always fundraising. And, you know, we've been saying over and over again, fundraising always isn't the key issue. It's a lot of the systems, and do you have all of your systems in place? So I think with us talking about it, because most nonprofits, this is front of mind with 18 days left until Christmas. Whoa. And then just 24 days until 2017. This is one of the most important times and really, really busy for the nonprofit sector because they're trying to do their end-of-year fundraising efforts. And here's just a few facts. 30% of annual giving occurs in December, with 10% of it on the last 3 days. Wow. And online giving on December 31st, New Year's Eve, is concentrated between 12 noon and 7 p.m. And just this year, which Giving Tuesday, which was the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, donations have risen 73% from 2012. Those are phenomenal numbers. But it's also data that, you know, our nonprofits and those working in the sector really should be aware of, because it should really sort of help focus when they should send out emails and things like that. However, you know, there's some other strategies that need to be in their toolkit that they should use throughout the year. And we're going to talk about fundraising. We're going to talk about some legal requirements and the basic items that should be in place for every organization, such as, you know, their vital marketing components and the legal compliance. We're going to really tap into that because, as you said, many people just aren't aware of some of these not issues, but details that they should take care of if they're doing fundraising, not only locally, but especially if they cross state lines. So today, Pat and I will be joined. Yes.
I'm sorry. Do you know why that rose like that, 73%?
Well, because the whole online internet marketing platform is exploding. Okay. Most of the systems, the internet giving or even giving through your phone has risen 64%. It used to be between 3 and 7% people would give via their phone. It's now up to 64%. People open up emails, look at it on their phone, and actually make the donation via their iPads, you know, their tools, you know. And so that's why it has become so, it's grown. Just the whole millennials and all of those that they live on their phones and through their tablets. So, yeah, that's why those numbers have jumped so. But today we're going to have a really special guest. I'm excited to have him on with us. He's an expert in making sure that your organization is ready and compliant to solicit donations throughout the country. You know, and doesn't every organization just want to go national in terms of how they can reach out and get support? So this is going to be important and valuable information. So I want you to go out and grab a pen and paper and make sure you call in with questions. We're going to take questions throughout the show today at 347-945-7404. And we will be right back in a minute after our first commercial break with our special guest, Mark Lee. He's president of Affinity Fundraising Registration.
The Philantrepreneur Foundation. Build your capacity with our educational programs and professional services. Learn how to be a philantrepreneur. Maximize your social impact and maximize your revenue. Visit thephilantrepreneur.com or philantrepreneurfoundation.org to find services, resources, and training to launch, enhance, or improve your business or nonprofit strategy. While there, sign up to receive the Philantrepreneur Journal digital publication.
Okay, we are back now, and I want to welcome, a big welcome to Mark Lee, president of Affinity Fundraising Registration. And before we get into our discussion of fundraising, Mark, I want you to say hi to all of our listeners, and please just tell us more about your background and how you got into the whole nonprofit sector. So welcome to the show, Mark.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be with you today. I've been working in fundraising and in the nonprofit sector for probably about 30 years now. My work includes having run capital campaigns, done annual funds, done online fundraising, a lot of that. I had a heavy technical background at one time, and so I was able to turn that into a resource for nonprofits when in the years when online fundraising first hit, and I've done website design, I've done database work for nonprofits, you name it. I'm kind of a hands-on guy. I was on staff for many years, and then I became, as many people do, I became a consultant. And then in 2008, we created fundraisingregistration.com. Fundraising registration is just a less fancy name for the formal words charitable solicitation registration.
Yeah, a fundraising registration sounds easier anyway. But you were like watching the whole internet explosion happen, and it's sort of apropos that Pat asked that question, why were those fundraising numbers jumping up so high? Perhaps you have some insight on that whole internet, online fundraising scenario.
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the level of expertise in the nonprofit community has risen so dramatically. There was a time when hardly anybody knew how to create a website, and it was a very expensive proposition to do. Now it seems like every person that comes out of college can call themselves a web designer by virtue of having taken an HTML course somewhere along the line. And those resources really stand people in good stead for moving forward. They understand the medium. So now the nonprofits have the expertise in-house and on staff to do the work, and I think they're taking good advantage of it.
Absolutely. And plus there's a lot of platforms that just make it so easy, even for the novice, to put together a website that really supports, what they're doing. And in fact, I just gave a class this past week on marketing for nonprofits, and one of the key essential points I said, okay, you can't rely on Facebook to be your brand or the face. You have to have a website to drive them to brand who you are, and yeah, just the whole using the internet and I say moving into the 21st century, basically, using the tools that make it readily available for you to reach. I mean, just a global audience now, and that's really what the internet has opened up for all of the nonprofits. So it really folds into, the topic that we'll be talking with you about today, because every nonprofit tries to solicit funds, that whole solicitation, even Nevada. And I wanted to say that you're up in Colorado, in Denver, right, in that area?
That's correct.
Yes, and my co-host just moved. Yes, my co-host, Pat, just moved from Denver. So we have a connection here.
Listen, I sure did, and I just want to say, and I don't know if this is true or not, Mark, but I had a much easier time fundraising for my nonprofit in Colorado than I do in Nevada.
I don't have a clue as to why that would be.
I don't either.
It's a total, take one of my classes and you'll find all about that demographic, the whole social capital level in Nevada. It is a strange animal, but that's not why we're here. But also it sort of lends to why Nevadans might need to go outside of the state to solicit funds. So, and that's what we're sort of talking about. And I was going to say that Nevada passed in 2014 a statute that you must file a statement of solicitation form and register not only as a nonprofit entity in the state, but through another level of registration with a solicitation statement. And so many nonprofits feel, once they've created their entity and got their 501c3 determination letter, that they can go out and say, please donate to us. So what is the issue that is we're really looking at here, Mark?
Well, the issue is basically fraud. There are so many folks that register nonprofits that are false entities. Just this past year, the various charity officials and attorneys general in the different states caught on to and caught up with one individual who, under various names that all included the word American and cancer, had been raising well over $5 million falsely that never went to any of the things that they were intended to go to. And so there are bad actors out there. There's simple ignorance of what's supposed to be done. The attorney generals in various states take a very dim view of boards using assets of the organization as they choose, feeling that there's no restriction on how they can use them. And when that kind of thing comes to their attention, they're in hot pursuit, I can tell you. Now, It's not like there's a policeman on every corner, but it is the law, and it's the law because of all of the fraud that has been perpetrated on the public and on the unsuspecting donor.
And go ahead, Pat.
I'm sorry, Mark. So when you say soliciting from another state, is that the organization has a full-blown website, visible website presence in that state, or they're just asking? I mean, because I asked my mom, and she donates from California. I know that's not an issue, but I mean, exactly what do you mean? What's showing up that shouldn't be showing up in another state for a nonprofit raising funds?
When a nonprofit, if someone in Colorado, for instance, wants to raise money from the good people of Kansas, they are required first to go to the Kansas Secretary of State and complete the necessary registration forms that identify them to the authorities in Kansas. And it's really the first step in the people of Kansas knowing that this is likely a good actor, someone who's willing to obey the registration laws. You have to remember that it's not the donation that requires registration. It is the solicitation. And whatever that, whatever form a solicitation is basically any means of asking for money. So if we're out there just posting a website, most states do not consider that to be a solicitation. There are a few who have asserted that it is, but I think that that's really the purpose of that is simply to stake out a legal position if it should come up. Where the website becomes a solicitation is when you drive people to it and they find a donate button. So anybody who's just sort of surfing around the internet without any impetus and finds your organization and says, "Wow, whatever, Animals Forever, what a great organization. I love it. I'm going to make a donation to them." That donation does not trigger the registration requirement. The registration requirement is triggered when you send an email to that person saying, "You were so great last April sending us that $50 donation. It's the end of the year. Would you send us another donation? If you'd like to learn more about our programs for next year, go to our website, www. And there they find a donate button." So it's the rules of the state in which the potential donor lives that apply. It's not the rules of Colorado when I'm soliciting people in Kansas. It's not the rules of Nevada when you're soliciting people in California. It's where the potential donor lives.
And I think I wanted to really clarify for our listeners also, because I teach responsible fundraising at UNLV, and I'm glad you specified the solicitation. If you are driving people to your website to look at programs, as long as you are not asking them for money and saying, "Please donate again," or this, but asking them to look at your program because we do what's called board-bound training. It's a program. That's one of our programs. And we do a lot of social media posting and pushing people to our website, but we never in those posts ask for donations. We're asking them to look for and explore the programs that we're doing. So is that still clear of the solicitation umbrella, as I would call it?
It depends. When they get to your website, do you have a donate button? If you do, then practically every state with registration statutes, practically every state considers that to be a solicitation. So if you have, for whatever reason, caused people to go to your website and there they find the solicitation button, the donate button, you're supposed to be registered.
I was just in listening to that. I'm thinking about everybody that with the Giving Monday and the Colorado Giving and everything, they're driving people from Facebook to their sites where they probably have a donate button. When you're on Facebook, your friends are everywhere, not just in your state. So
yeah, there's a donate button on Facebook.
Exactly. I have one, and it never would have dawned on me. But from what you're saying, it sounds like when you use Facebook to drive people to the website, and you're obviously on the giving days asking for them to give, and then like in my case, don't bust me, Mark, but I'm going to tell you, in my case, I said, go check out my website, see what we do, and donate. So was that illegal?
I need to qualify this and say I'm not a lawyer.
Don't lock me up.
This is not legal advice. My lawyer friends tell me I have to say that, or they can sue me for practicing law without a license. But goodness. Our experience of working with regulators in 40 different states is that, yes, you are soliciting in a way that requires registration. Now, if what's going on Facebook is a purely viral event, then the regulators aren't looking at that so carefully. If, on the other hand, you are trying to create a viral event and emailing all of your friends and neighbors and relatives and saying, send everybody on your list a request that they come to our site and donate, it's not something that they're doing out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because, they may be doing it, but they're doing it because they were asked.
Victoria,
and so with
are you
that
surprised?
I am, because generally I don't.
Everybody's
ask for funds.
surprised when this comes up.
Yeah,
Everybody is
generally
surprised.
it's all about programming or registering for events. Our nonprofit awareness expo that we do. We're promoting and talking about events and activities, and in passing through to reach those, yes, they will see a donate button, but we're actually haven't out and out asked for them to donate. We want them to attend and take advantage of some of our resources. Interesting. I'll have to really look further into that.
I think everybody listening are like, oh my goodness, because I think everybody's kind of done that, and it's kind of more flow over or overflow than it is, on purpose, so to speak. And wow, that's all I can say. Okay. So now that we're totally flabbergasted, but let's clarify some other things for our listeners here, because I'm sure now they're like, oh my goodness. So, but the IRS actually, in fact, I'm writing a book now, and I was talking about that IRS technically only has 4 legal requirements, and one of them is public disclosure, and that's where this 990 basically came into effect, and they really became more diligent in 2007 when they issued the Sarbanes-Oxley and things. So how does the public accessibility of 990 affect the registration requirements and the enforcements?
Well, there are a couple of things. Since all of that happened in 2008, most of the states have gone ahead and put all of their requirements for registration online. And one of those requirements is that you send about 24 states, I think, 32 states require that you send them information from your 990 every year. And the states in turn many of them put those 990s online, everything in them except for Schedule B, which has the names and addresses and amounts of all of your donors over a certain limit. So everything except that goes online. You'll find it online in the likes of California and New York and several other states as well. That being said, it used to be that the only way to really get hold of an organization's 990 easily was to go to GuideStar and look them up one by one. But last June, the IRS lost a Freedom of Information suit and were required by the deciding judge to place all of their information that they receive digitally for 990s, to place all of that information online. And it's online now. It's in the Amazon cloud. It's available and downloadable by anybody for free. We've done it here. A lot of information, and we want. But it's not only available to us; it's available to the state regulators. And parenthetically, let me say, state regulators are like parents. They talk to each other, and you don't realize that always. And so the state regulators now can go into those 990s and they can search them And if you get your algorithm right, while the question isn't asked of everybody, what states are you registered in? It is, by the way, asked of some people, depending on exactly what they're reporting to the IRS. They may have to answer that question. So it's not that simple, but you can develop an algorithm that will give you a pretty good idea as to whether or not an organization is registered out of state for fundraising in other states. So that, it's the two-edged sword of this of online fundraising. It gives us great access to everybody, but it also provides the people responsible for regulating nonprofits, and people go, what? Regulate nonprofits? We have to be regulated? Yes, everybody gets regulated in one for another. It gives them great tools as well. Another example of a tool is that most of the states have a means where a resident of the state can go online and report what they perceive to be a potentially fraudulent contribution. Or request for contribution, solicitation. They may ask, they may go to a state website and see if your organization is registered in that state. And we regularly have customers who come to us saying, what's happened? We had a major donor in Florida who's going to give us a lot of money, and then they went online and they couldn't find us. And well, the answer was that they hadn't renewed their registration in 2 years, and if they didn't keep it current every year, then their name fell off of the good guys list in Florida. So all of this kind of works together. It's not just the IRS, but the IRS having their database online has really been a game changer, and people are just beginning to figure it out.
Wow, Mark,
and
you were just
why
popping eyes open today.
Right, and that's why they actually created the whole 990 because their database was uncontrollable. They had no way of knowing if nonprofits were still active or closed, and so they didn't create the 990 process to punish people. They were just trying to clean up their database to find, okay, so who is really still active here? They were actually doing everyone a favor by creating 990, the 990 process, I should call it. Because people get freaked out. Oh, what is the 990? I said, okay, it's a good thing. It's a good thing, but it does mean that you have to stay on top of your systems and what you're doing, and make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You just can't slide by anymore. So I'm still flabbergasted. So I guess that's why I'm half speechless. But there's because I deal with a lot of small or mid-sized nonprofits that really aren't seeking to fundraise outside of, I'll say, just the valley here. But you never know where a donation might come from, and I guess that's why I'm still, in my mind toying with the word solicitation and really, what does that mean? But moving to the next question, I'll figure it out later and write a blog about it. Are you seeing the cost to raise funds going up, or does it get reported in the 990s? And maybe I didn't ask that question right, but I think you get it.
It does get reported in the 990s. It's in the income section right at the top. You see the total income from contributions of all kinds. And while we might argue whether or not certain types of income should be counted in that, the standard is that everything does. It's all in question one. I think 1H is the last item that is the sum total of total contributions. And then you're also reporting your fundraising expenses on 990. And we see a pretty standard range. We see that people are working hard to keep that number down. There's been a lot of questions about the cost to raise money, and frankly, to me, the notion that it costs, the traditional number has always been 15%, and now this is just from our customer base. I haven't run this on the IRS numbers yet, but we will. But from among our customers, we're seeing, and so it's a sample of like 200, but we're seeing that yes, 14% is the average among all organizations. But that shifts if you move into colleges and universities, which actually spend a lot of money to raise their money.
Yeah.
They can spend up to 50%.
They hire those big companies to do the Yeah,
they do.
And also, just to interject just a moment, it also depends on whether or not you are a new organization, because if you're new, you need to spend more money on fundraising on just the awareness level, because people don't know about it.
Right.
So more of those funds have to get out there to establish you as an organization. And that sort of follows the whole business cycle of, what do you focus on when you're first starting? It's marketing and fundraising. And so the numbers...
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right on that. It can start at least, we see it. Now, remember, organizations that come to us don't usually come to us straight out of the gun before they've even got their 501c3. Although increasingly we are seeing that, so it's not unusual at all for organizations to start high, and then you see when they hit the $1 to $5 million to $10 million range, they've got their fundraising costs down in the 10-11% range, and once they get over $10 million, they're even lower. They're down in the 5 and 6% range. So
their systems are set up.
And there's a little bit of variation depending on the type of organization. And in those last numbers, I've excluded colleges and universities from those numbers, so they're not skewing it.
Okay. And that totally makes sense, because the bigger you are then able to have an in-house development person, on staff, so you don't have to do so many external things where the cost to do things are higher. And once you get your systems, set up, it's not recreating the wheel each time. And so, it totally makes sense how they can keep those costs if you're bigger. But, I don't want the listeners, especially if you're small, to feel as if you have to keep everything under 15%, especially now when you're trying to build something, and that makes it a different thing. So, okay, here we are. We're talking Nevada, Colorado. What are the easiest states to get this certification, and maybe some of the most difficult ones?
Colorado's actually pretty easy. They charge $10 a year to do it. It's all online. If you've got your 990 in front of you, you can pretty much do all of the information that Colorado requires and do the data entry. Kansas is another easy one to do. They're not very difficult. Nevada's pretty difficult right now because, frankly, they haven't figured out what they're doing. But they don't. They will figure it out, but they haven't yet. Illinois. I can't tell you how many new customers have said to us, "Oh, thank you. We no longer have to deal with the state of Illinois," when they've tried to do it themselves. Illinois is just horrible, and if somebody from the regulator's office is listening, I will say that to them face to face. They're the worst state to deal with.
Why is that, Mark? Why are they so difficult?
You have two sets of requirements, from one from the Secretary of State and one from the Attorney General. The two offices don't appear to agree on what the requirements are. And on any given day, if you talk to folks in the regulator's office, and we talk to them all the time, you'll get information from one that one person, say at 2 o'clock, and at 3 o'clock, you'll get completely different information from another person.
Wow.
We've sent applications there that have sat on somebody's desk until the check had reached its expiration date as far as the state of Illinois was concerned, at which point they've canceled the registration, sent it back, and levied a $300 fine.
Oh, no. That's
yes.
Crazy.
Oh.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It's completely
Wow.
nuts. Another hard one is the District of Columbia, because they have 5 different steps that you have to go through to get fully registered, and they're expensive. The state of Hawaii has
clarify,
been.
I want to ask a question, and this sort of, what is the difference between solicitation registration and filing a foreign corporate registration? Okay, so I'm registered in Nevada.
That's a great question.
Well, please answer it for me.
Most states require that if you are going into that state and putting boots on the ground, as we like to call it, that you get a certificate as a foreign entity to conduct business in that state. It's often called a certificate of authority. Shorthand, it's a business license. So you get that by registering with the Secretary of State. And usually the Secretary of State handles the business license and the Attorney General handles the fundraising registration. So some states
with
require
this internet
both.
craze, that's because, if you have a website, and like you said, if you're sending them to your website, basically, if you're just going to be doing all your work in one state, but your reach goes for funding to others, you need to have that solicitation. But if, like you said, if you're going to do a program in another state where you come in and set up shop, not necessarily permanent, but just like a 3-day program, you would need to register.
Yeah.
So is that in lieu of a business license in that particular state, Mark?
It's pretty much the same thing. You have to do that if you want to apply for tax exemption in the state for your organization while you're conducting business there. If you're just going into a state on a one-time basis, you're going to be in and out in 30 days. Probably you don't need to. The thing that might drive it would be your liability insurance, and you'd want to check with your insurance company before going to that state to be sure that you would be covered in the event that you didn't have that certificate of authority to conduct business in the state. I think it's a good thing for nonprofits to get, and they're usually not very expensive for nonprofits.
Yeah, and also to recognize that if you're invited in by another organization, you're just coming in as a guest, that you're not actually setting up shop. And if you know what I mean. For example,
usually, yes.
I'm going back to Michigan. I'm being invited in by United Way of Southern Michigan, to do a program. I'm just a guest, and I wouldn't have to register my organization. Okay,
I don't think so. But then I'm not a lawyer. And one of the vaguest things, the states won't really tell you. The states won't tell you up front that you need a business license. They'll only tell you once they decide you should have had one.
Yes.
Yes. So
that's how they do it.
Oh
it's
my
what they used
goodness!
to call Dog's Law. Dog's Law. You only know you've done something bad when you get kicked.
You know what, Victoria? When this show is over, I think we better just say, if you don't listen to this show in particular, nonprofits, because this has just been a wealth of knowledge, and we're only halfway through it. Oh my God, Mark, what else are you going to tell us?
Okay, let me get to this next question, because one of the questions you have is, what is your advice for people wanting to use the URS? I don't know what URS is. Could you clarify what that is for us?
You bet. The URS is the Unified Registration Statement. And what happened? It was a really excellent idea, and it worked for about 6 months. The states got together, and they said, "Well, what questions do we all ask that we can ask in common so that everybody can use one form?" And they just have to fill out one form and send this to us, rather than send out 40 different forms to 40 different states. And so they created this. The regulator here in Colorado was a fellow named Chris Cash, and he was one of the driving forces behind this. They got it up and running, but the problem was that there was nobody to keep it up and keep it current. And it has had a number of revisions to it, but much of the information is inaccurate. When the last major revision came out, there were 12 statements of fact, and absolutely none of the information for registration in the District of Columbia was any good. It just kept getting more and more complex. And then some states would say, okay, in addition to the URS, you have to file this state form of ours. And then they would say, well, we'll accept it for the initial registration, but for the renewal registration, you have to use our forms. So that cut in half the number of states that would accept it. It was never accepted in more than about 32 states in the first place out of the 40 that require some sort of registration. And now it's gotten to the point where states that used to be on board with it are refusing to accept it at all. As states get their own databases, they're beginning to require that you use their database and not file paper with them. And it's just like writing out 40 different forms. You have to enter the information 40 different times.
That's crazy.
Okay.
Wow.
And so instead of making it easier, now it's become more complex. So, okay, this is getting more complicated as we go along. So that Charleston principles, I'm just going to keep on moving here because I'm looking at the time. Haven't even put in a second one of our ads, but I think I'm going to skip it because this information is just so valuable. So tell us about the Charleston principles. As a guide to registration requirements.
This same group of regulators that brought us the URS, and mind you, it was a good idea. They created, at a special meeting in Charleston, principles for how to know when you're supposed to register for online fundraising. And that those principles said they gave an example. They didn't say, here's the bright line for registration. They just gave an example. And the example was that if you have 150 households that you solicit by email or any online manner, that you should be registered in our state. Now, they also said that if you solicit any households by U.S. Postal Service or by telephone, you have to be registered in our state. So this applied only, this bright line of 150 applied only to internet solicitations.
Okay.
So, and 150 is a drop in the bucket. Well, they went home, and then legislators began to have different ideas than that, and the people who were in charge didn't like the idea of that 150. So it's really, I believe, only Tennessee and maybe Arkansas that have adopted the 150, but Arkansas doesn't publish it, and Tennessee, you have to talk to somebody online on the telephone to get them to say what the exact number is. Colorado has drawn and published a bright line, but theirs is that if you have 50 households that you solicit, or you have 10 donors from Colorado that were solicited online, then you have to be registered. But if you're sending any kind of mail or telephone calls into the state, you have to be registered with the state of Colorado.
Yeah.
So that, people come to me all the time and say, well, we've got 2 donors in this state. We've got 2 donors from California. Do we have to register there? And I say to them, well, let's assume that one of those donors at least is your mother-in-law, and she gives because her daughter, the executive director of the organization, asks her. Provided your mother-in-law and you don't have a falling out and she doesn't report you to the state of California, you're probably okay soliciting that person or anybody who is part of your tight circle. It's as you begin to expand that circle that you need to take seriously the number of donors. And so certainly the Colorado Bright Line could be applied to any state, even though it's just for Colorado. If you're at 10 donors or more for any state, it's probably a pretty good idea for you to register. And I've heard the Attorney General, the Assistant Attorney General in Massachusetts, say that he thought it was a good idea to register at about half that number. And that's another state that's difficult. You asked about difficult states. Let me flag one more for you. Pennsylvania has always had a reputation of being a tough state to deal with, and they are aggressively fining people that do not register there. And the fine is $25 a month for every month in which you have been soliciting people in Pennsylvania when you should have been registered, plus the annual fee for each year.
I won't talk to anybody in Pennsylvania ever.
Yeah, those costs can go up to $3,000.
I don't know if I'll talk to anybody in any state anymore or ask for anything. I'm going to cut my mother off, too, because, oh, my goodness.
But, in fact, I sent an email to someone that is trying to build a partnership with us, and they sent an email that didn't follow what I can, the spam requirements. And, I just politely emailed them back, and I mentioned it to them because people are paying attention. People, they do look at, when they get things. For that particular email, I wanted to opt out, and there was no unsubscribe button. So, and I know that's a no-no. So, it's I make sure we follow those. But, this has truly, truly been enlightening on so many levels. I'm going to make sure we post this show and push it out there so people really can get this information. And I like I said, I'm going to even write a blog about some of these details and quote you on some of these stats and things that they need to be aware of. And so, you're with Affinity Fundraising Registrations. Do you do other things, other support for nonprofits, or give back to them, and how do you support them in other ways?
Well, we do give back to the community. We offer 2 kinds of fundraising registration support. We provide full service support for organizations that want it. When I went into this, before I went into this, I was a fundraising consultant, and I was always going in and telling people that they needed to get this done. And so I knew how much it cost, and we wanted to make sure that there was something that was affordable. So we created a 2-tiered system, one of which uses our online database. We call it the Affinity Single Portal, and we use it every day in our work for 200 full-service customers. We we worked with that database to make it accessible by any organization that wants to use it on an independent registration basis, so that it's heavily documented, highly user-friendly, and you can go in and use that same system for less than a third of what it would cost for full service every year. And the end product is that once you've entered your data, it's there, and it produces exactly the forms that you need for the right states and gives you guidance as to what attachments to include, and they're completely fully populated forms that you then mail to the states where they still accept hard copy. We do that. We provide discounted rates for smaller organizations, and by smaller I mean those that make $500,000 or less. We provide, we give steep discounts to religious organizations, those that will qualify for religious exemptions in various states. So we try and encourage them to do the right thing and get registered and make it easier for them. And we've created a system where people can move back and forth between independent use of our system and full service if they need it. So there are all of those. And we support a couple of local organizations, deliberately local organizations that do not solicit out of state, so that we don't have any conflict of interest with them and don't have to worry that they're not registered someplace where they should be. Mainly
Right.
An organization called the Same Cafe that provides food for anybody that wants it and comes in. They can get a free lunch if they need it. So that's how we try and give back to the community. I've spent my life working with nonprofits and know the great good that they do. But there can be great harm that's done too. The number of new nonprofits that spring up every time there's some sort of natural disaster is just phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
And you cannot be sure if you go to one that's not been vetted through a process like this that they can do it. And let me say just one other thing about registration.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, anybody can these days. Anybody can get an IRS determination letter.
Yeah, they fast track
what are you doing
them
with their money?
Yeah, they do.
Exactly.
Yeah, IRS fast tracks disaster applications. You can get it back in almost overnight, almost. Okay.
Getting registered in the States puts your organization under a microscope, and it is far more demanding than the initial registration process with the IRS. That really is a good measure as to whether or not this is an organization that merits your support in many ways. Obviously, there are other criteria, mission and accountability and integrity,
yes.
And the reputation. But this goes a long way toward establishing that reputation.
Mark, I have to say, this has been Fundraising Registration University. I mean, you think you know enough or even a lot, and then somebody like you comes along and you realize, I don't really know a lot about what I'm doing in terms of fundraising. And so I think this has been, Victoria, you probably agree, just one of the best programs and so enlightening for our listeners.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad, we always have these scripts, and that's why I always say, hey, it's tentative of what we're going to do, because we've used this entire show to go over the whole registration, why it's so important, the ins and outs, the ups and downs, and even, the language and what you're doing that many times we don't even think about because we're not consciously reaching cross boundaries. But because of the day and age of the internet, we do it without our, actually knowing that we're doing it. And so we have to make sure that we're protected on all fronts. So what I want to do is, Mark, this has been phenomenal, all of this information. Like I said, I'm going to be pushing this out. But if someone wants to contact you, that they're listening in, and especially, to have it on the show so that when we push it out, how can people contact you to get more information or the services and just the best way to find you?
All of the information and plenty of free resources are found on our website, along with our contact information, our telephone number, which I'll also give you. But the website is fundraisingregistration.com, www.fundraisingregistration.com, all one word. You can get our phone number there, which is 303-578-9622, and contact us through that. And we're delighted to be of help. We run ourselves regular information sessions about it. In January, we'll post it on our website, but we will have a webinar upcoming. It'll be our 7th annual webinar talking about changes in the registration process in the different states that have occurred over the previous year or are expected in the upcoming year. So that's something that is there. There are links to all of the state sites on our website. You can search all of the state databases from our website. You have to do it one at a time, unfortunately, but you can get all that information on fundraisingregistration.com.
Absolutely. This has been phenomenal. I'm going to shoot you an email, ask you to, send me more information about your webinar so I can post it and put it out into our resource list and make sure all of our connections know about it. It was truly, truly a pleasure having you on the show today.
Well,
I can see where I'm going to have. You're going to be invited back as things change. Anytime something changes and you want to come on and give us an update, just reach out to me and I will bring you on the show immediately, because what you have brought to us today has been just super valuable. And once again, thank you for joining us on the Philantrepreneur Radio Show. It's been a pleasure.
You're very welcome. It's been my pleasure as well. I've enjoyed your company and your questions, and I just appreciate the opportunity to reach out to your listeners. I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you so much. Okay, so as we come to the end of another show, I just want you to know that we have one more show in 2016. It will be jam-packed with information, so make sure that you tune in on Wednesday, December 21st, as we close out 2016. And so this is Dr. Victoria Boyd, founder of the Philantrepreneur Foundation and Board-Bound Leadership, and my wonderful co-host, Pat Landacker, founder of Ruby Red Slipper Project and Synergy Coaching. And as we are always so proud to bring valuable tips, resources, and information your way, and please, just to answer any of your questions. So in the meantime, we ask, are you a philantrepreneur?
Thank you for tuning in to the Philantrepreneur Radio Show, hosted by Dr. Victoria Boyd and Pat Landacker. Get involved. Follow us on Facebook and other social media outlets. If you wish to share comments or suggestions or appear as a guest on our show, visit www.philantrepreneurfoundation.org. To contact us, email support@pcclv.org. The Philantrepreneur Radio Show is a production of and sponsored by the Philantrepreneur Foundation, a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.